progress. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, welcome to this press conference called by the Alliance for Change. Today, August 29, 2025, just a couple of days before Guyanese head to the polls. With me at this press conference, I have to my far left the Vice Chairman of the Alliance for Change, Mr. Michael Carrington. Next to him is Mr. Jaipal Sharma. Then we have the leader of the Alliance for Change, Mr. Nigel Hughes, and right next to me is Ms. Nicola Trotman, our polling agent. We will start with a statement from Ms. Trotman, and then we will have Mr. Hughes making some remarks on a number of issues, after which we will take your questions. Nicola, please.
Thank you, Beverly. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of the media.
Sorry, there's a comment that the audio is low. So.
Closer, sister. Is that better?
Better?
If you can get some feedback from those online.
Is that better? Okay.
Okay.
So, this week at GCOM, we have had several activities taking place at the same time. We have had the Defense Forces balloting, which was concluded last Friday. We had the sorting and the enveloping of those ballots that is scheduled to be intermixed. While sorting those ballots, it was discovered that 2 ballots, one from Region 5 and one from Region 10, was accounted for in Region 4. How that happened, nobody can actually say. However, I got a missive yesterday from the commission saying that when the ballots will be
Ladies and gentlemen of the media, just bear with us a minute. We're having some technical problems.
Sound 1, is this any better?
Mic test.
This one?
Mic test. Mic test. Testing mic 1. Is this okay now?
So, you need me to recap?
Yes, please.
Okay. As I was saying, in so Andrew, you're saying okay, but yeah, okay. My apologies for the my technical difficulties. So last Friday, we had the discipline forces casting their ballots. On Saturday, while sorting the ballots, it was discovered that 2 ballots, one from Region 5, one from Region 6, had been reassigned, accounted for in Region 4. To date, there has been no concrete reason as to how this happened. However, yesterday, we received a letter from GCOM informing us that the Commission had decided that we will continue with the intermixing of so the intermixing was halted because of this phenomenon. Yesterday, we were informed that the Commission decided that they would continue with the intermixing of the disciplinary forces ballots, and when the polling station that receives the ballots, whether it's one polling station or 2 polling stations, receive the ballots that were out, that are non-Region 4 ballots, they are to notify the DCEO, Mr. Anil Gidding, and Mr. DeWarker, who is representing the CEO. They will go to those 2 polling stations or 1 polling station, uplift those 2 ballots after completing some paperwork, and take those 2 ballots to their respective regions to be counted. Ladies and gentlemen, that is going to cause confusion in polling places. That is going to cause a lot of trouble. I can see it happening. A ballot is opened and it's a different color. Given the level of distrust that this nation has already in this process, this is going to be another issue to add to it. So they have finished the process of enveloping the ballots, both for the disciplined forces and for the non-residents. And they've been enveloped and placed in briefcases for intermixing at, I think it's 346 different polling stations around the country. At the same time, we had the packing of the ballot boxes in GCOM. And in that process, we had ballot boxes that were mislabeled. So we had to have the list removed to ensure that the list in the ballot boxes were the same list that were supposed to be assigned to that ballot box for that polling station, because we could not afford to have an incorrect polling list of electors in a mislabeled ballot box. There were quite a few ballot boxes that were mislabeled, and we had to ask that they relabel all of the boxes that were mislabeled, that they relabel all of them again and ensure that the information in the box, particularly the list, was correct. That was done, and I think the process is will be completed today, that process. From yesterday, they started movement of ballot boxes. So yesterday, ballot boxes went to Camarang. Today, the other outlying areas, Region 1, Region 9, Region 7, Region 8, will receive their ballot boxes via air. And at the same time, we have the movement of the ballot boxes on the ground, that is by transport. So that if all goes well, and it seems to be on schedule, the only ballot boxes that will be moving tomorrow will be those of Region 4. Outside of that, we have the issue of the PPP requesting a change of 66 polling places around the country, most of them in Region 4. The deadline for the request for moving polling places is 21 days before election day. So that deadline is long gone, and it's a matter that is still being looked at the Commission. Why? We don't understand. The deadline was gone. The parties, the other political parties were not informed that this request, we heard about it by accident at a training session on the 17th. No, everybody knows you have the statutory timelines and they were being followed. If they were requests, it should have been made known to all parties that we will look at a late request for you. But it's 66 polling stations around this country that is being asked to be moved after the statutory deadline of the operations of the Commission. So there are a lot of issues that are ongoing, unfolding, coming up to this election that again leads to questions being asked of the readiness of GCOM to have these elections on Monday, 1st of September.
Thank you, Nicola. Ms. Nigerius, leader of the party.
Good afternoon, members of the press. Our final press conference before the national elections on Monday, and I thank you for having spent several press conferences here with us at causing considerable to vote on Monday. It is important that you go out and establish that right, that sacred right you have that has come after a lot of sacrifice. And even if you may be jaded, even if you are not necessarily persuaded, it is important that you have a say in the future of your country, and that way you do that by voting. We go to these elections with many questions. The most recent, of course, is the question of the inability of GCOM to find enough presiding officers who are willing to serve in the election. And in an interview this morning by one of the commissioners, Commissioner Alexander, with one of the news agencies, he said that there is the possibility that they may be looking at officers from the Guyana Defense Force serving as presiding officers. Now that, in and of itself, the fact that they're from the Army is not the problem. The problem comes with the level of training and the level of preparedness by persons who have no prior exposure to the electoral system, being thrust into positions of responsibility like presiding officers, who will have to make decisions in relation to the process when they've had no training in this regard. The fact that they're military officers doesn't change that fact. And given that we are, two days away from the elections, GCOM has been unable to find enough presiding officers, or those who were there before for some reason or the other are reluctant to act. This is a cause for concern. I don't know how it's going to be resolved, but I certainly think that the primary issue here is the question of being able to identify people who are sufficiently familiar with the electoral process, who by their decisions, of course, will not jeopardize the process unintentionally. As you know, there are significant fines and liabilities for breaching that process, and I'm sure the head of the Army would have something to say about that. I do want to point out that we go to the elections on Monday in the absence of the national census, which is a real issue and will be an issue for this country after the elections, because if the census contradicts the numbers that GCOM says are eligible to vote, and if as we say these days, the maths is not mathsing, then there's going to be a real problem, because you may have a result that is then challenged by the publication of the census figures. So again, I know it's late in the day, we believe that it is particularly important that those census figures be released. Again, you will recall that the Foreign Secretary said that there were 100,000 Venezuelans in the country. We know that the laws allow people who are members of the Commonwealth to vote. We know that there's one address somewhere in the East Coast near Ogle that had 120 persons registered at a single address. All of these issues have not been specifically addressed by GCOM. And again, we are going into yet another election where we know way in advance what the problems are. I would like to take the opportunity to welcome the foreign observers to the country. I want to particularly applaud the fact that there are increased numbers, significantly increased numbers. The European Union has expanded their numbers, increased their numbers from the last election. We have met them in various parts of the country, Region 9, in the outlying areas. We know that the Carter Center has certainly increased their members, and we applaud the Carter Center for making their statements earlier in the week about their concerns about the process. And this can only augur well. It is my hope that between now and the commencement of the poll at 6 o'clock on Monday morning, all the issues that cause concern about the confidence in the system are addressed to the satisfaction of all parties. We know that the People's Progressive Party has asked to change 66 locations, as Nicola has just said. Most of them are being moved from official buildings to private residencies. And the difficulty with this is if it is accepted by GCOM as a commission now, none of the other parties contesting in the elections will have an opportunity to object to any of those new locations that are being proposed. And that's a problem. So if we took an extreme example, if one of the proposed addresses is that of Mr. Sharma, who is a candidate for the Alliance for Change, when are the other parties going to have an objection, an opportunity to object? So again, we are creating the basis for concerns about the results. The Alliance for Change is looking forward to the election. We are looking forward to an incident-free election. And in this regard, we want to remind the Guyana Police Force of their constitutional mandate to act fairly, to protect and serve. We do not anticipate, even with great expectation, that they will ever be in a position where they will have to use anything looking like live rounds. It's unfortunate that various persons have made comments about the outcome and the acceptability of the outcome, but I do want to say that there are processes for addressing any difficulties anybody may have with the outcome, and the courts will remain open. I'm assuming that during the course of the weekend, either the Chancellor or the Chief Justice will announce that the courts will be available, who the duty judge is, and how one may be able to access the duty judge. And similarly, on Monday and the days for the following, during the course of the upcoming week, until there's a declaration, access to whoever the duty judge will be in the event that there are difficulties. We look forward, as I said before, and please forgive the repetition, to the election. We are winding up this weekend. And again, I want to thank members of the press who have been with us through the preparation for this election. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Nigel Hughes, presidential candidate for the Alliance for Change. Ladies and gentlemen of the media, we will now open the field to take your questions. If you can use the raise hand feature, identify yourself and the agency you represent. Let me also inform you that at this point, the polling agent, the election agent for the Alliance for Change, Ms. Trotman, had to leave, but we have online to answer any questions Mr. David Patterson, the chairman of the Alliance for Change. No questions. I see no hand raised. I see no hand raised at this point in time. Mr. Weeks, can you just confirm that for me? No questions? Okay, so I don't think there will be any questions this week. Am I correct in that? The positions would have been made clear. Just confirm for me, please, Andrew. No questions? Okay, well then.
I was wondering, I've noticed some chatter on social media about this question of not splitting the vote. It is clear that, or splitting the vote depending on your interpretation. I just want to clarify what I have said and what the Alliance for Change has said. One of the leaders of the parties, one of the traditional parties, two major traditional parties, as a matter of fact, both of them, I think, appealed to the population not to split the vote. And our response to that is, first of all, splitting the vote means you vote for one of those two parties. So clearly, if you say don't split the vote, you're saying to the population, you must vote for one of these two parties. We reject that as a principle and as a philosophy. It's part of the reason why we've gotten into trouble. And therefore, we say you should vote for the party you believe has the best policies. And you should not be placed in a position where you fear that your non-vote for one of the traditional parties is going to adversely affect the outcome of the election in terms of putting the other party in. I saw a very good summary by one of the members of the Forward Guyana party that actually had graphics. What we really need in Guyana to get us past this difficult stage is to have everybody at the table. And splitting the vote is the way you do that. And I want to particularly say that if you think of the last 30 years of democratic elections in the country since 1992, the period of highest scrutiny was during the time when you had a minority government. In every other period, the party that was in power ignored what the opposition had to say because it had the right to do that by virtue of one vote. So it didn't matter whether they had a majority of 5 votes, 6 votes, or a majority of 1, which we've had in the last few elections. They completely ignored everything the opposition had to say. And in the last 5 years in particular, even the constitutional review bodies that are set up under the parliamentary have not functioned, have not functioned, they have not been convened, they've only been convened when the government of the day wants them to be. So clearly, the only time you, the people, have the ability to influence the policy and remind the government, persuade the government, compel the government to act in your best interest is when there's a minority government. And that is precisely why we say split the vote, because the only time you're going to get that is if we have everybody at the table and you vote for who has the best policies.
Thank you, Mr. Nigel Hughes. Ladies and gentlemen, I will again invite you to ask your questions. You can just jump right in because I don't see any raised hands at this time. There being no questions, ladies and gentlemen.
Sorry. Forgive me, it's old age. There's another particularly disturbing development that has taken place over the 3 weeks, and I want to applaud Gordon Mosley for bringing it to our attention publicly. And that is the question of the use of your personal data by a political party to contact potential voters to encourage them to vote for a particular party. And here's why it's very, very disturbing and calls, not only should be called out, but we believe that this warrants very serious censure, both by GCOM, and we're calling on them to do that, and also our good friends in the observer communities. Several persons, and Mr. Mosley just highlighted some of them, have been receiving calls from persons urging them to vote for the People's Progressive Party. Upon inquiry by the callers of how that personal information was obtained, they were told that they got it, they were representing the PPP, and the PPP gave them that information. I know from 4 people in my office that the only way they could have gotten that information is when they went to get the cash grant money, and that information was given to them. Yesterday in his press conference, the Vice President said that they had obtained it from various sources. Now, the principle of a fair election is that whatever information you have on the way to access a voter, every party in the election must have the same ability. So if you use the information from the cash grant, whether you use the information from the Ministry of Housing, you cannot use your position as the party in government to take the government's information, which is the private property of the people who provided it to the government, to use it to your disadvantage and to the complete disadvantage of every other party in the election to contact potential voters. That is not only unfair, it can affect the outcome of the vote. So if the People's Progressive Party can call 100,000 voters and say to them, vote for the PPP, and the Alliance for Change, Forward Guyana, ALP, don't have the same ability to reach those same 100,000 persons, that is an interference in free and fair elections. Because what you have done is that you have put those parties in a position of disadvantage, and there is a principle known as the equality of arms. And this violates that principle. If we are all going to the election and we are all competing by the same rules, then we must all be able to have access to the same means. You, as the party that happens to be in government, can't take the government's information, particularly cash grant information, and use it for political purposes and say that you have got it by various means. We are specifically saying to GCOM that they need to pronounce on that immediately. It has serious consequences for the outcome of the election. Because one of the things is, if you've asked 100,000 people to vote for the PPP, the question is going to be, what is the strike rate for success? If the strike rate for success is 15%, that means 15,000 people, as a result of that call, are going to vote for the PPP. And no other political party has been given the same access. And this is not PPP information. This is Government of Guyana personal data acquired using their status as government, not as the People's Progressive Party. So we particularly will be highlighting this to all of the observer missions, that at this stage you have an admission by the People's Progressive Party, which is the party that happens to be in government, that they have been using information obtained by the government for political purposes, and no other party has had access. And therefore, the question of the fairness and equality of this election has been brought into sharp focus prior to actually going to the poll. And this is a very, very serious issue. And again, I would like to commend Mr. Mosley, the Fourth Estate, for bringing this forward, because it's a lot more than simply saying people are calling. It is a complete disadvantage, unfair and not permitted by any principle of law.
If I may add. Thank you. If I may add, in our grounding exercise, which I was part of in Region 6, that was like about 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, we went into Region 5 and 6, speaking to residents, sharing our ideas, our plans, our manifesto. And people was telling us, even then, that they were receiving calls. So it's more than receiving calls, because people said to us that on more than one occasion, they asked them to vote for the PPP, and was saying to them they could access small business grant. This is beyond a call to say, vote for me. This is to say, you support the PAPC and you can get access to grants. And we run it up to the elections. And so this is actually buying of votes that is happening. A senior citizen told us in Region 6 that he applied for a land in Region 10 to do agriculture or some other activities, and he received a call to say his approval is available. He must come to Linden and sign up the papers. Now, this again is evidence that this is actual vote buying by the PPP. And I want to touch also on the bloated list and the census, the 2022 census. This is $2 billion Guyana taxpayers' money spent on the 2022 census, and 3 years after, we can't get the figures of the census. Now, it only takes the first 2 pages of the census to tell us the size of the population. You go to any of the census report from 2002, 2012, the first 2 or 3 pages tell you what we want to know as politicians. What is the size of the population of the country? So in relation to 2002, the first few pages said the population is 751,223 people in the country. Go to 10 years now, where the census of the most recent figure that we have, 2012 census, say the census figure is 746,955,000 people. There is a reduction of 4,268 persons, citizens of this country, a reduction from 2002 to 2012. So here we are 10 years presently in 2022, and we don't have a figure. So are we supposed to say it's going to reduce by 4,000 or 5,000? Maybe that is the case. But the OLE that GCOM gave us, seeing the figure is 757,690. Now, I want you to juxtapose that figure with the OLE of the 2020 elections, which was 661,378 voters, which is an increase of 96,302. And GCOM never explained to us how that increase of the 96,302 came about. And that is very serious. Now, in the 2020 elections, only about 70% turnout they had in that elections. Because of the bloated list, it only shows 70%, because the actual voters that turned out in the 2020 elections was 464,563. That was the recount figure. Now, this looked like a reasonable number for us, 500,000 or so. So look at 500,000 against 757,690. So we're speaking about like what? About over 250,000, right? So this is the size of the bloated list from the last election. So this is something that is serious. The international community should make note of that. We are concerned at the level of AFC, a political party contesting the elections, that this is a concern for every single party contesting these elections. I don't see the PPC there's any issues about it, but certainly we have issues. Thank you.
Thank you,
Beverly?
Mr. Jaipal Sharmish. Yes.
Sorry, this seems to be the day of last-minute notices. I want to also again commend another journalist, Mr. Enrico Wolford, who recently disclosed information on flights that the president has made in the last 2 months compared to the flights that were made earlier in the year. And those flights were made essentially to campaign. So let me just give you an example of why this is again part of the unfairness of the electoral process and why it may have an impact. The return fare to Lethem is $84,000. The return fare. If you want to campaign in Aishalton, and this affects all the opposition parties, you have to fly to Lethem, and then you have to pay close to $100,000 to hire a 4x4 to drive from Lethem to Aishalton. And then, of course, you've got to pay accommodation. You come out the next day because it takes you about 4 or 5 hours to get in there. In January and February, the president flew maybe twice in 1 month. I think in February he didn't fly at all. He has taken the government asset, the government airline, the government aircraft, sorry, and he has traveled, I think, I just want to quote Mr. Wolford correctly, that he has traveled 43 times in July and August. 43. And in the month before, June, he only traveled 4 times. So imagine 43 trips. If he did those 43 trips to Lethem, to PK, to wherever, and these were trips in which everything he did was designed to get votes for the People's Progressive Party, every other political party doesn't have the same means and doesn't have the same access as the president does. So already you're starting with a staggered starting line. This is like running a handicap race, where all the other political parties are left behind and the government gets, as we say in Guyana, edge. In 100 meters, they get 70 meters edge and then tell you run the race. Because for every time he goes into Region 9, he gets away with $84,000. And it's not just him, it's he and all of those other persons who are traveling with him, speaking at the political rallies, who fly in with him on the plane. So if 10 people are on the plane, that's $840,000 he doesn't have to pay, which every other political party will have to find that money. If he goes to Aishalton, he uses all the official government material and equipment to get there. So when you say that we have a fair election, you can't have a fair election where the government, the president, has been using state assets to go around this country to campaign, where we have to pay, and quite often, we have to go by boat. We can't get there by helicopter. So if we want to get to Jawala or Philippi, we have to fly to Camarang and then go up the river for several hours to get to either of those locations. The president goes there and gets in by helicopter. And when you put that with the fact that they've been using the citizens' data to contact people, which no other party has, this race is already stacked long before we get out of the starting block. I thank you. I promise you nothing else at this point.
Because there will be so many other issues, where you can show how the government using state assets and state resources to campaign. If you look at the state-owned media, the Guyana Chronicle, for example, you would find that it is flooded every day, every page, with positive reports about what the PPP government is doing. If there is a report on the activities of the opposition parties or the other parties, it's usually a very short report and not a very favorable report. So when it comes to state media, media access, we tried placing an ad ahead of the discipline services ballot, polling day, and we were told by NCN that they do not have space for that 60-second advertisement. 2 spots, 120 seconds in total, that NCN did not have a space to play. So it's a clear case of the PPP just trying to lock all the other parties out of getting their message out. We've seen in so many locations parties having problems having their meetings.
They've carried the rallies live.
Yes, state media have carried rallies live. The ministry website, ministry Facebook page being used to broadcast live PPP activities. I can clearly mention this on my Facebook page. So these are things, where the PPP has monopolized state media an asset that belong to the people of Guyana. The PPP have monopolized that for their own use. We saw in Linden, just a few days after parties would have signed that code of conduct prepared by the Ethnic Relations Commission, just a few days after that signing, we saw the video, persons in their PPP jersey, the voice was very distinguishable, you could clearly, easily recognize it, saying that there's a AFC rally in Linden, let us go chase them out. Chase them out. Just a few days after signing a code of conduct that specifically states that parties have a right to have their meetings and persons have a right to assemble and all these democratic principles. You clearly heard the PPP saying, mash up the AFC rally, chase them out. And so, ladies and gentlemen, I once again ask if there are questions, if you can just raise your hand. At this point, I don't see any, so let me take this time to thank you for being at this press conference virtually. We look forward to very robust, very fair coverage over the weekend as we head to the polls on September 1, and we make this appeal to vote for policies. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen of the media, and to all those who would have joined us online. Thank you.